Death Spore by Harry Adam Knight. I just finished reading this book recently and I wanted to give you guys a review, hopefully in depth enough that you would consider reading it or not consider reading it based on what you hear from the review. So let's go ahead and just jump right into it. So I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but I created a rubric. So a rubric for rating and grading and reviewing horror books as well as science fiction books. And what I ended up doing was doing a 1 out of 10 questions, 1 to 5 scale for those questions. So out of the 10 questions, possible max points they can get is 5. So total points of 50. So a book, if it was absolutely perfect, would receive 50. And if it was absolutely terrible, it would receive 10. It would get a 1 on everything. So I wanted to give you a little bit of information about Harry Adam Knight and the book Death Spore. Harry Adam Knight wrote a mix of different things. He wrote some fiction, he wrote some nonfiction, he wrote some sci-fi, some fantasy, and a lot of times the horror stuff that he wrote had a good mix of like fantasy in there as well. Most of that was in between the 80s and 90s. So he was an Australian author, and he fairly recently, in 2005, died of pancreatic cancer in London. And as I said, he was an Australian author who wrote lots of different things. Probably most notably was The Fungus, which is the book we're talking about today, Death Spore. The Fungus was written in 1985 and then re-released as Death Spore in 1990. He also wrote the book Slimer, which I usually have sitting right here, and it's not there right now. It's in my room. And he wrote the book Slimer. There's another one that he wrote called Carnosaur, another one called Worm, a bunch of different stuff that's really kind of for the horror lovers, are ones they want to get their hands on and read. The Fungus, just as a complete overview and just my basic opinion before going through the whole rubric of everything, was it was super good. I loved it. I thought it was very enjoyable and highly recommend it. If you are a fan of things like Greg Bear's Blood Music, super good book as well, or maybe things like The Last of Us, like the TV show or the video game, I think you'll really enjoy Death Spore or The Fungus. If you find those other things interesting, try to grab a copy of this one. There are some newer printed versions. There's the Death Spore copy that I have as well, and then there's the original Fungus copies that were printed, and all of them have great covers. The newer one looks kind of, you wouldn't know what it was about really, but the other ones you can tell, and they're fairly hard to come by. So if you see them, grab them. So the main basic plot of the story is that there is a scientist who's trying to genetically modify different things to be able to solve world hunger, is the idea. If we can do this with this fungus or this mushroom or whatever, and we can create a genetically modified, bigger, better, healthier, sustained mushroom, then we can solve world hunger. We could plant in areas where things wouldn't normally plant, or wouldn't normally grow, I should say. We could, do that kind of stuff, and we could solve world hunger. And that's the idea. As a story kicks off, pretty much immediately, something happens to the fungus. It develops and it starts to spread. Then there is kind of a catastrophe that happens where, how do we stop the spread of this fungus? Pretty simple plot in a way, but it's actually quite enjoyable and really deals with some, things that potentially could be a possibility today. So being written back in 1985, it would have been like kind of maybe on the cusp of genetically modifying things or research like that. And I think it's pretty insightful for its time. Okay, now the first part of the rubric is going to cover plot and structure of the book. So if it's really poor, it's going to be like kind of disjointed. It's going to have like an incoherent plot. It's just not going to make sense. It's going to have like really bad pacing issues. It's going to be super slow. And then all the way up to, being well structured. Just the plot flows nicely and moves along really well without choppy breaks or, extreme lulls in the plot where you're just waiting for something to happen. I think in Death Spore, it moved along quite nice. There was very few times where I felt like it kind of dipped down a little bit and it spent too much time explaining something or too long on a certain area. There was a couple places where I felt like it did it just slightly. But all in all, I feel like the plot and the structure was moving along at a really good pace. I've certainly read a lot of other books where it was not the case. So I would say I'd actually give this one a 5 for plot and structure. That it moved along really well and was quite enjoyable. So number 2, character development. So ranging from like flat, kind of one-dimensional characters that have no depth to them. They're just blah. They're just there in the story and you know nothing about them. You care nothing about them, to the characters who have, ranging up to characters who have depth to them. You see their struggles, their pain, their difficulties, their hurts, their desires for, maybe some are desiring to have world domination, or some that are desiring to have, just good be put back into things. And there's, an in-between there. And I think in this story, I would say there's pretty good character development for most of them. There was one that I didn't think got fleshed out very well. So I'd say for the most part, yes, they were all developed really well. And you learn there's certain people who have just kind of a all or nothing attitude towards things, that they want, this needs to be stopped. We have to put an end to this, and I'll do anything to stop it. And they'll even compromise morals and things like that, to the person who's kind of sitting back and going, no, we need to get to the bottom of this, and we need to use it for scientific research and that kind of stuff. And then you have other characters mixed in the story. I would say maybe it's a 4. They're developed well, but they're not overly developed. It's not so much so that it's only character driven kind of thing. So it is. I'd give it a 4. Next up, we'd have atmosphere and setting. This would be kind of a vague, all the way down at number 1. It would be kind of a vague atmosphere where it's underdeveloped. You don't really know what's happening. You don't feel like you're in the story because there hasn't been enough detail or description to draw you in and paint the picture for you. And then the setting is just kind of like, where are they right now? I don't know what's going on. Sometimes that happens where it's just a small little blurb and then nothing else. And if you kind of miss it, then you have no idea what's going on or where they're at. And I find that happens quite a bit in different stories. It's just spouted out like, they're in London, and then that's it, and there's nothing else. But you need some more depth to it. And so on the other end of the spectrum, it would be very immersive. You're getting description of actual places, and maybe they're saying, as we're walking down the cobblestone streets of Stalingrad, and they're just giving these great descriptions. You could see the bullet-ridden walls from the previous war of the 19th century, and you're just getting all these descriptions and stories that actually develop the atmosphere and the setting. I think because of the nature of the book, where fungus is growing a lot and taking over certain things, I think the atmosphere and setting is very good, because it has to be in order. It could not be, and then the book would be bad. But it has to be for the book to be good, because it's having to give detailed descriptions of things happening to different buildings, different people, different cars, stores, things like that. Yeah, I think it does it very well. So I would give that a 5. Originality and creativity. This would be at the bottom of the scale. It would just be lacking originality. It would be, like it just sounds like everything else under the sun. There's no creativity to it. It's just blah, you know. And then to the other end, it's very innovative. It's it's kind of redefining the genre. I think in a way this has kind of been done before on certain things where some sort of something takes over the world and is a problem. I mean, I could think of several different books where this is kind of a common theme. I mean, like genocides and alien invasion, they come in, they plant a seed, and the plants take over the world. I can't say how many times it's been done before this, but I'm thinking of even like Day of the Triffids or things like that. So, you have like blood music, Day of the Triffids, whatever I just said, genocides. I mean, there's a lot that have this kind of theme to them. It is original in the sense of, or creative in how it comes about, but I think all in all, it's kind of been done before. I'd give it a 3 in that area because even though it's a very good book and I really enjoyed the story, I have heard things like it before. If you don't like the idea of a virus taking over and ravaging the world kind of thing, you're probably not going to like something like this anyway. So the next one would be emotionally impactful or like scariness or scares that it induces. So part of it, the beginning of it would be, or the lower end would be, that it just fails to invoke any kind of fear or emotional stirring or anything like that. It would just doesn't happen. And on the other side, it's very intense, very emotional. It's very stirring, when you're reading it, you're stirred up, you're maybe frightened. It has some sort of lasting impact on you. And I would say this isn't the most emotional book or most, impactful in the fear genre or something like that. So I would probably give it a 3 also. There are certain things that happen where you're like, you're emotional and you're hurt by what's going on, or you're scared for somebody or things like that. So there are some of that in there, but it's not overwhelming throughout. So it's not just filled or flowing through the whole story. It's bits and pieces. So I'd go about halfway. I'd say 3. Okay, writing style and language is the next one. Writing style, I mean, on the bottom end of the scale, it would be poor quality, numerous errors, like editing issues, makes it hard to read because there's just choppiness to it or something like that. I have a couple books that have major edits in them, or major editing errors in them, where I'm going, oh, you just misspelled that. And I'm like highlighting like, oh, that's not where that punctuation goes, or that's not how you say that, or things like that. There's one book that I like, but it's terribly messed up at times. And it's using things like a guy who's a native Russian speaker, or who speaks Russian, who's learned a little bit of English, but it's really bad English, begins to give large formulated sentences that are, something that a native English speaker probably wouldn't say. And that throws, something like that throws me way out of the book. And I'm going, this guy doesn't know how to say that. I mean, he's like saying, hello, friend, how are you? And then all of a sudden he proceeds to say, the spectrometer on the gauge is at the maximum level, and we are about to lose the efficiency of the thermal coupling generators. And he just goes on. That doesn't make any sense, but you know what I mean. He just rattles off this giant sentence of like words that aren't normally used, when he could barely say, "Hello, my friend, how are you?" or something like that, because he's a non-native English speaker. So anyways, that would be the bottom of writing style, I think. Sometimes it's just poor quality. It's just bad writing, right? So on the other end, it would be very highly, very, very well written. There's, it's very like polished. I don't know. There's no errors. There's no sentence structure things that are strange and pull you out of the story. It's very just well written. So I think this was extremely well written. You could tell he was intelligent and had an ability to write very well. I don't think there's much more to say on that. It's just written very well. It's detailed, and where it needs to be a little graphic, it's a little graphic. Other places where it needs more detail, it's detailed well. Descriptive writing is in there. I mean, all in all, I think it's pretty darn good writing style. So I'm going to give that a 5. So the next one is kind of a little bit similar to some of the other ones, but it's the idea of like thematic depth to it. Is there a theme running through this, or is it just really superficial? If there's no discernible theme, obviously it's going to be 1. But if you can recognize that there's a really deep theme in there, that it's thought provoking and makes you, kind of after the fact process things, I think that can be a good thing. And I say for this one, there's a theme to it, and maybe it has to do a lot with the dangers of experimenting with biology and stuff like that. There's a couple other ones too, but I think that one's kind of the major theme, like the problem with experimenting on things we shouldn't mess with, kind of thing. So I would give this one a 5. That one's pretty clear throughout this book. I don't think it's a questionable one. The next one is suspense and tension. So rather than just being an emotional scene or something fearful, there's a tension that's held throughout it, I think. And some books just lack that. It's just not there. There's no tension, there's no fear, I don't feel like, as I'm turning the pages, I'm like, yeah, whatever happens to this guy, happens to this guy. I don't care. I'm not worried about what's going on. And then there's there's a gripping tension, or just masterfully suspenseful. I think of movies like, say, Halloween, and that big one-shot take that's going from outside and going around and then going into the room and then up the stairs, and it's just building tension and building tension. You're gripped and you're just held on. I think this one does that for a lot of it, but it's only for a certain aspect of the story. So the tension of the fungus taking over and like, what are we going to do about it? I don't think that area of it had a lot of tension. It was just kind of like, well, yeah, what's going to happen? Probably because we've heard this story a few times, or over and over, and so I don't think that was the tension part. There was other aspects of the story that brought tension to it, which is probably a smart way to write it, because that has been done before, so it's hard to build tension with something like that if everybody knows it and you know what's going to happen. So adding in different points of suspense or tension probably made the book, So I would give it a 4 on that one. All right, so plot twists and surprises. I would say this is good. There is obviously a 1 would be just there isn't any, and no surprises, no plot twist, no nothing. And then to a 5, it would be, a great twist, or, like an M. Night Shyamalan Sixth Sense kind of twist, so it's just surprising, it's impactful, it's memorable. So I would say this one it does have a twist to it. It does have a kind of a shock to it, like, oh, I didn't see that coming. And that happens a couple times throughout. I'm not just talking about the major plot, but also like events that take place. How are they going to get out of this one? Oh, whoa. Can't believe that happened. So I would say this one's a good 4 on that one. It's nothing. It's not M. Night Shyamalan level, but it's old M. Night Shyamalan level. It's Alfred Hitchcocky. How about that? I don't know what the rankings of 1 through 5 are on those, but I'd say it's a 4. It's pretty good. Overall enjoyment, engagement in the story is the next one. So overall, just complete enjoyment of the story, or how engaged I was. I devoured this one, to be honest. So 1 would be not enjoyable. I couldn't finish it, or it was just a chore to get through, or just, pulling teeth to make it to the end. And then 5 would be just exceptionally enjoyable, captivating from start to finish. You can't put it down. Page turner, as they say. I would say for me, this one, it was a 5. I read it straight through, super enjoyable. I didn't want to stop reading it. It was very good, and I would highly, highly recommend it to anybody. Well, most anybody. So for me, that one gets a 5, hands down. So before I score it, I do want to say a couple of things. There are some scenes in it that were kind of silly in my opinion, but they're very graphic. So there's some sexual scenes in it that are graphic, and I'm not saying there should be trigger warnings or any of that stuff. I'm just saying there's some scenes in it that are pretty graphic, so I wouldn't recommend this to like, here, oh, you're 12 years old, you should read this, So that's why I would say be cautious about a couple things. If you're reading horror, you're kind of expecting stuff like that. So if you're triggered by it, stop reading horror. If it adds to the story and it's making the story more enjoyable or furthering the plot along, then it's good, it's needed. All right, so let's score this bad boy, huh? For plot and structure, 5 stars. For character and development, 4. For atmosphere and setting, 5. For originality and creativity, 3. Emotional impact and scares, 3. Writing style and language, 5. Thematic depth, 5. Suspense and tension, 4. Plot twists and surprises, 4. And overall enjoyment and engagement, 5. So out of 50, we have a total of 43 points out of 50. That's pretty darn good for a book, I'd say. So I highly recommend this. If you haven't picked up a copy, please do so and let me know what you think. I hope you enjoyed this review. Appreciate you guys for being here. Don't forget to hit that like and the subscribe button and let me know your thoughts below.